Following the collapse of the Han, several kingdoms are going to make a bid to try and reunite all of China, but unfortunately they did not possess the resources to dominate its rivals over any sort of long-term period. Power fell therefore into the hands of the regional governors and warlords, like the ruthless and ambitious warrior poet Cao Cao and his son Cao Pi. The last Han emperor, Xian, reigned until 220, when Cao Pi forced his abdication and thus brought an end to the Han Dynasty. The next 350 years were a period of political division, where a series of small regional governments tried to compete with one another, but all of them could not reunite China under one roof. In some ways, this age of disunity was similar to the Dark Ages of Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. Those assigned to put down the Yellow Turban uprising emerged as the new powers of China. Cao Pi, who forced the abdication of the last Han emperor, established the Wei dynasty in the north. A year later, another warlord named Liu Bei was crowned emperor of the kingdom of Shu in the west. 8 years later, in 229, a third warlord, Sun Quan, declared himself emperor of the kingdom of Wu in the south. In 265, a rebel Wei leader forced the emperor to abdicate and then declared the Jin dynasty, which defeated the other two kingdoms before attempting to rule over a unified China. The Jin unified the country, but only temporarily, because they were never able to establish a durable political structure based on the power of the emperor. In the late 6th century, Yang Jian brought all of China once again under imperial rule. His Sui dynasty survived less than 30 years, but the tradition of centralized rule outlived his house. Yang Jian imposed political discipline and extended his rule through the rest of China. He began his rise to power under a Turkish ruler who appointed him the Duke of Sui in northern China. In 580, his patron dies, and he leaves his 7-year-old son as heir. Yang Jian installed the boy as ruler, but eventually forced his abdication 1 year later, claiming the throne and the mandate of heaven, ruling under the name of Wen. By 589, the House of Sui ruled all of China. The emperors of the Sui dynasty placed demands on their subjects in the course of building a strong, centralized government. Sui emperors, for example, ordered the construction of palaces, granaries. They dispatched military forces to Central Asia and Korea. They levied high taxes, and they demanded compulsory labor service. Wen's second son, Yang Guan, succeeded to the throne and declared himself Yang Di, or the Flaming Emperor. He amassed a great collection of manuscripts and built an elaborate library. But his most elaborate building project was the Grand Canal, a vast waterway that ultimately stretched for 1,500 miles. His massive construction projects were good for China in the long term, but in the short term it wasn't, mainly because of the fact that it depended on higher taxes and massive conscription of forced laborers, which leads to several bouts of resentment. Revolts will break out in the north and in central China, but no one dared tell the emperor, because of the fact he actually had previously beaten to death an official who brought him bad news. In 618, a disgruntled general will assassinate the emperor in his bathhouse, bringing an end to the Sui dynasty.